From Religion News Service, this is Saved by the City, a special summer series with me, Katelyn Beaty, and it's just me, Katelyn. And we're about to get personal. I'm a little nervous, but I am a grown-ass woman. So sit back, grab a refreshing beverage, and join me for the exciting special summer series of 2024, Tell Katelyn What to Do with Her Life. Happy summer, friends. I hope you've been able to unplug, catch some sun, and watch impressive humans doing impressive feats with the human body at the Summer Olympics. I gotta be honest, summer is my least favorite season in New York City. The body odor truly knows no bounds. But this summer has been so fun. In June, Roxy, my podcast co-host, got married. And her husband's wedding was one for the books. Our producer, Jonathan, can attest.
I can so attest.
Between two other weddings, beach days, and karaoke outings, I've been soaking up everything the New York City summer has to offer. The summer has also brought some big life decisions. So here's the top line item. I'm going to be turning 40 very, very soon. And it does feel to me like the start of a new life stage. Now, I'm not middle age yet, but I'm also clearly aging out of the young adult church group gang, if you know what I mean. Except, of course, I am a woman, and as we've established, a grown-ass one at that. And I have some big life decisions coming at me quickly. And that feels both scary and exhilarating. Which is why I've co-opted this series to do a bit of soul searching. We're calling it Tell Katelyn What to Do with Her Life. Thankfully, I'm not doing this soul searching alone. Each week, we'll hear bits of wisdom from what I'm calling the Beaty Brain Trust. These are friends, peers, and family members who will give advice on 4 big areas of discernment. As you'll soon hear, they don't always agree with each other, but they are all great conversation partners. On each episode, I'll also be joined for a deeper conversation with a new friend and fellow podcaster, Elizabeth Oldfield. As you'll hear, she and I quickly move out of easy answers to finding deeper and better questions about a life worth living. In this episode, I'm wrestling with the question, which scares me to say, but here we are. Is it time for me to leave New York? And if so, where in the world should I live instead? Now, before you Say by the City diehards freak out, I still love New York. I love the life I have built here. It's a beautiful, exciting, energizing place to live. And it can also be a hard place to live. And it's far away from some of my favorite people in the world. People will say you'll know when it's time to leave New York. Is that now? Have I learned all the lessons New York has to teach me? When is it time to say goodbye to a place you love for new possibilities that could be around the corner? So these are the questions that I'm asking. And I definitely need to hear from the Beaty Brain Trust. It's like a squad, only smarter and more sophisticated. Before we hear from the Beaty Brain Trust, you should probably know who you're hearing from. First up, we have Richard Clark, a friend and former colleague who runs his own podcast company, Area Code Audio.
I am recording right now, by the way.
The thing that I so appreciate about Richard is that he says whatever comes to mind, like he can't help it. And every brain trust needs an unfiltered dude.
What I'll probably end up doing is like processing and then maybe like summing it up at the end or something. We'll see.
Next, we have Sarah Scherf.
Best friend, mother of 4. I don't know. This is a big identity question.
Sarah is one of my oldest and dearest friends. She's a mother of 4 in Birmingham, Alabama, and I basically think she's a magical human being and that she's right about everything. So I had to include her.
Freelance philosopher. I don't have much to my name right now, is what I'm saying.
Next up is Chuck DeGroat, a familiar name to longtime listeners of the podcast.
So it's important to say it's Chuck because the conversational format will be a little bit like that.
Next up is Chuck DeGroat. Chuck is an expert on soul care, an author, a professor of Christian spirituality. His BS meter is high, And he likes his martinis dry. You gotta have that too.
I don't like the vermouth. I go just with straight gin.
I also talked with E. Karen and Tim Beaty, also known as my parents. They are newly retired. They live in Dayton, Ohio. One of the best things about the stage of life is that sometimes you get to be friends with your parents. And my teenage self would not believe it.
Love you, Kiki.
Yes, Kate, love you.
And finally, we had to include Roxy, who needs no introduction and who is a crucial cog in the machine that is SBTC and the Beaty Brain Trust.
Am I supposed to be funny or wise? Or wise cracking?
So I asked all of them, should I leave New York? And if so, where should I live instead?
Is this like a genuine thing you're considering, is moving from New York City? Are you tired of living in New York City? Is it making you burned out? What's the deal with that? Is this for a podcast or is this real?
And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Do you think that I would do well in Alabama?
No.
Where do you think I should live if I left New York? Do you have any pitches to make?
This is really easy, Katelyn. It's Grand Rapids. You know that. You know that this is GR Jerusalem. This is the center of Christian publishing. This is where you belong. It'll be a homecoming. The prodigal comes home.
Yes, I love that. You're also calling me to perhaps some greater obscurity, which we all love. That always feels good to our egos.
Yeah, we tell ourselves we're doing that, and then we do other things that defy that, right? So
My off the top answer is Chicago. It has a big downtown, and it's not that far from some of the places you love.
Like
A home in Ohio, plus you'd have all the conveniences of big city living. So Chicago is my answer.
that's a pretty good answer. What do you think, Dad?
I know you are happy living in New York City. I couldn't live there, but I understand why you do.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would say is it would be nice to have you closer to home, within a 2 to 3 hour radius at the most.
Oh, okay.
There's just a lot of things that go on that we tell you about, that you hear about, but you're just not there, and it's not the same if you're not there.
Something to think about, for sure. What do you love about Alabama?
I love that you can be in a different part of the city and run into someone that you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's socially accessible and it feels familiar. I also just love it's hilly and the streets are windy and you don't know what direction you're facing half the time. It's beautiful. It's verdant. It's wild. It's overgrown. There's a lot of birds.
Birds? You got birds down there?
We got birds.
Say more.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful place to live. There's a lot of really good food. You know, there are like James Beard Award winning pastry chefs and stuff. It has a lot to offer in a little space. Those are reasons why I love Birmingham.
So my first question is, where should I live?
Next door to me. Or across the street. Or like kitty corner is also fine.
Where is that?
TBD. But I will know by October 1st.
I just told my landlord I'm moving at the end of October.
Wait, you're just telling me that too right now.
Well, I don't know where I'm moving to. I'm just saying, I'm sorry. I'm telling you. Fair. One of the takeaways from the Beaty Brain Trust is that there are plenty of great places to live besides New York. I don't think many New Yorkers want to admit that to themselves, but it is true. And one of the things that makes a place great is the people you're building a life with there. Building a life with others with intentionality is one of Elizabeth Oldfield's passion projects. For a few years, Elizabeth and her family have shared and co-owned a home outside of London with another couple.
Yeah, it was quite a long discernment process. We explored it with a few different other people and it wasn't quite the right fit. I think who you do this with, very, very important. But we basically dated each other. We seriously dated each other.
Choosing to live with friends is a big countercultural risk, but it can bring massive rewards. And this model of living offers lessons for all of us on what it means to really lean into we more than we, even if we're not quite ready to move in with friends. We'll hear from Elizabeth right after the break. Tell Katelyn what to do with her life. Again, apologies for the third person. Comes to you from RNS Audio, the podcast network of Religion News Service and Saved by the City. For the best in religion reporting, be sure to visit religionnews.com. And never fear, Roxy and I will be back before you know it for the next season of SBTC. We'll also be dropping new episodes of Apocryphon with Tyler Huckabee. As we ramp up for the next season, we'd love to hear your ideas for guests and topics. Shoot us an email at sbtcpodcast@religionnews.com. And be sure to drop us a rating or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm delighted to welcome Elizabeth Oldfield. Elizabeth is the author of the new book, Fully Alive, Tending to the Soul in Turbulent Times, host of the Sacred Podcast, and also just recently turned 40. And she assures me the water's just fine. Getting down to the very specific first question I have. Where should I live?
Should we just get a map out?
Just to be clear, I could live anywhere. I can do my job from anywhere. I don't think my employer would be happy to find that I have decided or that the Lord has called me to live in like Papua New Guinea. But there are seemingly a limitless number of choices for where I could live. So where should I live?
Okay, so I'm going to really struggle not to go into coach mode throughout this conversation, but it is important that I ask you a question back, which is, you can't answer that question without answering, what are the things that you want to define your life? What is the kind of person you want to be becoming? Because that will largely shape how you answer this and all the big questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I live in New York City. As you know, you were here for a book event a couple weeks ago, which was lovely. And one of the things that living in a big city with lots of different types of people, an incredible diversity in all ways, represented in a very concentrated place, is that it has given me a posture of openness and curiosity to the world and to people who are different from me. That is a posture I want to nourish and lean into. So because of that, I think the idea of moving to or living in a place where there's much more homogeneity or where things are more oriented around comfort and convenience, which New York is definitely not. There's a concern that there would be something about that would grow stale or that would be more kind of myopic. I mean, the suburbs in the United States are very much oriented around the single family home. I'm an unmarried person. I don't have children. It seems kind of lonely, honestly. The idea of like, yes, I could buy a big house in the suburbs, but then I'm living by myself in a big house. Why do I want to do that? Why is living in a big house or owning a home itself a goal?
Yeah.
So that is a way that New York has really fostered something good in me, and I think has given me more sturdiness in my faith identity, even while it has also continued to change because I've had to choose it in a place where it's not taken for granted that like everybody kind of grew up Christian or grew up in the church or has some familiarity with Christian language. Like going to church on Sunday mornings is kind of a weird choice in New York for a lot of people. So that has been good. One of the big challenges is people are really busy here. There's all sorts of like really interesting, fun, enriching things to do, and everybody's out doing them. And I think it can be hard to create sturdy community here. I think even just like getting to your friend's apartment can be a whole journey. And people come and go in cities. Like they're here to get what they are looking for professionally or creatively, and then they leave when they found the thing.
So I'm hearing that the kind of the stimulation and the diversity of the city makes you feel like it's helping you become the kind of person you want to be, who's open and curious, that having to choose to practice your faith against the norm is a good thing and has been nourishing, but that there's a question around, can you build actual kind of stable community here? Is that being hard the thing that's driving you to even ask this question?
Yes. And my family doesn't live here.
And so would that be the obvious, if you were going to leave New York, would that be the obvious place to go? Near to
Definitely nearer to them. My whole family lives in Ohio. That's where I grew up. There are cities within driving distance of where they live, Chicago being like the primary one. The New York snob in me is like, Chicago is never going to compare to New York City, but that's okay. You can get a lot of the things you like about living in a city in another city.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is the family connection.
And is there a pull factor? Are they asking you?
They have never asked me to move closer to home. And also I know that it would mean a lot for them to be able to see me more frequently. And the really cool thing about getting older is that you can become friends with your parents. Like they're never not going to be your parents. But I think we enjoy each other's company in new ways that I wasn't anticipating even 10 years ago.
Yeah. Does it feel like choosing between your family and choosing between the friends that are in New York and the level of stimulation and growth that you feel where you are?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the primary bifurcation.
And is it that you don't really know what you want, or you think you should want something and don't?
I think I want competing things. I think I want things that feel to be in tension or competition.
Presumably you wouldn't be agonizing so much over this question if you felt, I do this, we all do this. If you felt a clear sense of God's leading, which again happens to be like once a decade.
You mean that's how frequently God leads us?
That's how frequently God has led me very directly, right? I felt, led, but I'm assuming you don't feel like God is telling you where to live. Otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm not in like a Jonah situation.
It's not disobedience.
Like if Jonah only had a podcast to kind of sort out his feelings about Nineveh.
Oh, yeah, the whale would have been left in peace.
Actually, okay, how do I know what is God's leading, and how do I know what is my ego, like projected out up into the sky?
Yeah. How do you?
I think the few times that I have in my life that I have felt a clear sense of leading, there has been a deep alignment with who I am. I mean, to take the Jonah example, we sometimes think of God's leading as being disruptive and drawing us away from some of our kind of natural inclinations or interests and what makes us come alive, what gives us joy. And I'm wondering if actually God's leading is more about confirming what's already there. And that's not to say that we couldn't also be asked to sacrifice or to do things that we don't want to do, right? Like I want to keep that part. It seems like a really important part of the Christian tradition, the whole notion of like self-sacrifice and
there's a cross. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole cross thing seems important. But yeah, that there's kind of been like a natural confirmation or alignment as well as peace.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question which I find very clarifying but is a bit brutal. Say you live another 25 years. That's short, but so that's what we got. What are the things you want people to be able to say about you at your funeral? How would you love to be remembered? And then which path is more likely to allow that to happen?
I don't think I can answer that right now.
Yeah, sorry. It's a chewable one.
But I think it is the right question. I think it gets at this question of life legacy and how you want to be intimately connected to other people, and recognizing that these choices and decisions about how we live and how we spend our time and energy and what we invest in necessarily affect other people. We hope in a positive, good, nourishing way.
Yeah. These kind of ones are so knotty because, if we don't feel God's strong leading, and actually it's not a case of just discerning what does our heart actually desire, which I think as long as it's not, meth or to be a gangland lord, if it's like within the spectrum of good gifts that we have been given to pursue, is a reasonable way to orient ourselves, right? I believe that God wants us to flourish and that the deep longings of our soul will lead us right. And usually the place they will lead us is into deeper relationship with him and into deeper relationship with others. This choice is tricky because it's between two slightly different sets of relationships. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm wondering if there are ways that you can look to bring that bit that feels like is missing from your city life. If there are creative ways, and obviously I'm obsessed with community living, so sure, join a commune. But are there ways that you can resist those tides in cities that pull people apart and create around you or join or connect a few people into those kind of covenant soul friendships that feels like the bit that the city is not giving you at the moment?
Yes, I can think of other people who want the same thing, who I'm already connected with. But I did want to ask you, you just mentioned the commune. So if you're willing to share, and I think you are, because The Guardian recently wrote a very...
Yeah, the Times, fairly revealing.
Yes. You share a home with other adults. Your family lives with other adults. You co-own the property. This is so radically countercultural in so many ways. It's a huge investment commitment. Talk about how you and your partner discerned that was the right path for you.
So I hate it when people ask for advice and everyone just reflects back their own stories. So it may not be that this is at all appropriate, but I think we were facing a similar thing that you're facing 10 years ago. I actually felt quite a strong calling to the city, which I had not expected because I grew up in the countryside. I expected to return to the countryside. I am a lover of trees. In some ways, London was not a natural fit for me. It was not love at first sight. I did not particularly enjoy it to begin with. And then over time felt through being part of a local congregation and really feeling this sense of calling to the sort of ideas people of the culture, found myself sort of increasingly falling in love with living in London. But both my husband and my parents are outside London in much more small suburban places where we felt like we would also find it quite stifling. I think that there is a sort of nobility in the discipline of being someone who can get over themselves sufficiently to see that everyone is interesting, right? That everywhere is interesting. If you pay it, it's that Marilyn Robinson thing. If you pay it the right kind of attention, then the beauty and complexity of any place and any group of people reveals itself to you. And still, I'm a snob, and I don't want to have to do that.
Good for you, Marilyn Robinson.
Yeah, good for you, Marilyn Robinson. I want to be around the theatre. But both of us have very good relationships with our parents, and similarly, we were in that stage where London was just pulling people apart. Moving to the suburbs. People who had kids were having kids and retreating into their bubbles. People who had big jobs were just tired out with their jobs, right? And it's as big and hard to traverse as New York. And so our moving into community was part of our response to this exact thing. How do we both serve this amazing city and allow the ways that it feels like it's growing us, which it is? I think that there is a huge spiritual aliveness in cities because it, as you put so beautifully, forces intentionality. It forces it not to be a hobby, right? And there's often flourishing congregations to be part of in a way that in large parts of the British countryside there are not. But without this lonely, atomizing, isolating tendency of the city. And so for us, initially renting with this other family and now buying a house together with these quite rigorous, actually, monastic inspired rhythms of morning prayer and evening prayer and house nights and open table hospitality nights and house days once a month felt like a way of creating these soul friends, these covenant relationships to resist those tides. We think about, the way the tides pull British beaches out into the Atlantic. There's a thing called longshore drift that you learn in geography lessons. And it felt like the city, everyone in the city, but particularly Christians, would come in and we'd join congregations. And then as soon as we got to a stage of actually being, frankly, civically useful or serving ourselves or mentoring anyone, we'd be swept out to the suburbs or beyond. and that houses like ours could be sort of seawalls. In British beaches, you'll see them sort of sticking out to sea, and they're there to help to hold the beach in place. You get these ecosystems, some plants that only grow in these little ecosystems, and we had that picture. And so I have found that the compromise of living really up close in very committed ways, but in the context of very, very urban London, to be very life-giving to me. And so it's possible that that's something you could explore.
Mm-hmm. When you all decided to really do this, we're gonna share this home and life together.
Yeah.
Did you know it was the right decision kind of going in? Did you have that clarity and peace? Was it something that you kind of worked out over time to be the right thing?
Yeah, it was quite a long discernment process. We explored it with a few different other people, and it wasn't quite the right fit. I think who you do this with, very, very important. And then we found our housemates now who had both lived in community houses previously. So they came with some experience, and they were not at all rosy tinted about the difficulties of it. Mm-hmm. And then we spent a year, but we basically dated each other. We seriously dated each other. We were meeting one evening a week for a year, and then having these deep conversations and going on field trips and reading about it. And it was only when we felt like we really knew each other and trusted the bones of each other. And we kept checking in, being like, does this still feel like we're up for it? Are you up for it? Making sure there were exit routes for people, because that's important. But yeah, it took about a year until we really felt like we're going to go for this. And then we still couldn't afford it. And there were various practical barriers, and a lot of them just moved overnight. And it felt like a real sign and confirmation that we should be brave and jump. And it has been amazing all the way through. But it is high risk. And I think I would always encourage people to do it with rigor and care and not jump into anything too fast.
Yeah. By this point in the first episode of Tell Katelyn What to Do with Her Life, you might actually be wondering, okay, so like, where are you going to live? Which is a fair question, since that is the central question that this episode has been built around. And here's what I can say as of today. I love New York, and I will always love New York. And I will always look back on this time in my life, the last 6 years that I've spent here, with such gratitude, with just a sense of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got to live there. And also, I have come to peace with the idea that New York will not be a forever home. But it is something that I can take with me. The lessons, the insights, the personal growth, the connections I made with other people, I don't have to cut those off. I can actually take those with me and use them to build a new and rich life in a different place. Now, you might be wondering where that place is. I truthfully am leaning Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Ohio, went to school in Michigan, spent over a decade in the Chicago suburbs. It, for better or worse, is the place that feels most familiar and comfortable to me. And as you heard, my family is in Ohio. And while I'm not ready to move to Ohio, I do want to be closer to family. Henning Mankell, the Swedish crime writer, says, "You can have more than one home. You can carry your roots with you and decide where they grow." And I love the freedom that this offers to not have to declare one place as your true home, but to carry a sense of home with you wherever you go. Except in Boca Raton, Florida. I might be entering midlife, but I'm not that old. Saved by the City is a Religion News Service production. The senior producer is Jay Woodward, and the consulting editor is Paul O'Donnell. Our editor is Julia Wyndham. Chaz Rousseau put together our look, and Martin Feller wrote our theme music. I'm Caitlin Beatty. Thanks for listening.